Well, hello and welcome to this special broadcast right here on CNBC TV 18. I had the benefit of traveling to the US to engage with the software developer community there. And what struck out for me was the number of Indian developers making their presence felt in the US market. And that picture grows vastly. That number of software developers grows vastly when you're looking at the Indian market. Now, speaking of this software development journey, hoping to partner with them is GitHub. They're bringing in their AI edge as far as software development is concerned. Their tool, Copilot, has been hugely successful, has been a roaring success with the Indian developer community. And to tell us more about it and what this journey ahead looks like for GitHub here in India is with us none other than the global CEO, Thomas Dohmke. Thank you so much for joining us, being a part of this conversation. Let's begin with giving our viewers, for the benefit of our viewers, a broad insight as to what Copilot does for the developer community.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be back in India. The energy is so fantastic. You know, on your question about what is GitHub Copilot is the first Copilot that we developed at Microsoft. It helps developers writing code in their editor. Actually, we didn't think about this as AI. We thought about this, how can we make developers more productive, more fulfilled while doing their work? And so while they're writing their code, it suggests to them the next few lines of code. It helps them explaining code. It helps them, exploring issues with their code and so much more.
That's interesting to hear. So when you talk of getting this AI edge to the Indian developer community, what does that mean? I've read many conversations. I've read some previous interactions and interviews that you've given as well. You speak of the idea of a convergence, the convergence of, number one, the vast talent pool that India has, combined with the AI edge. What does that translate into? What does that mean for India's software development community?
So we have this new technology, AI. It's an exciting time of what we think is a new era. The age of AI is starting. Copilot makes developers 55% more productive. It makes most developers more happy, more satisfied. And we think, AI will help them to build a better world. At the same time, when we look at India, we see a fast growing market. India today is the second largest community on GitHub with over 15 million developers. But more importantly, it's growing faster than the first contender, the United States, which is today over 20 million developers. And we think by 2027, India will overtake the United States and become the largest developer community on GitHub. So we have these two things, new technology and a growing population of developers that want to build exciting things, and they're going to converge to, I think, make India one of the leaders in this age of AI.
That's interesting, talking about India perhaps being in a sweet spot, so to speak. You mentioned the very large developer population on GitHub, which you understand is likely to grow even beyond the US by 2027. The question I want to ask you is, you're looking to grow this number even more. What I'm talking about, what I'm referring to, is essentially enabling coding in regional languages, in natural languages. Tell us more about that and the impact that's likely to have on the number of coders, developers here in the Indian market, what that is likely to translate into.
One of the most fascinating things about this new technology, large language models, is that they don't only speak source code, they don't only speak programming languages, they also can speak human languages. And they don't only speak English, they can speak German and Hindi, Brazilian Portuguese, or Spanish. And if you think about kids, when they grow up, they often don't grow up with English. That's not their first language unless, they're living in the United States or in the UK. And so, but many kids at age 6 or 7 are fascinated by technology. They probably already had access to mobile phones because their parents handed them one, to get some quiet minute, to play some games, or maybe explore math and reading and writing. And so by age 6, 7, maybe 8, they're interested to also use these mobile phones and their computers to create something. That's so much part of our human nature. And now, so they can go into Copilot and they can type in Hindi and say, how can I build a snake game or a Pong game, or tell me more about a programming language like Python, and they get a response back that is also in Hindi, right? And so it opens up that world where I can use my human language, the one I grew up with, to learn coding in the same way that I'm learning to play the guitar, or learning, to paint a picture, and of course about science and math and all these things that we learn in school. Now, that's not only true for kids, it's also true, for grown-ups, those that maybe have not been in technology At Microsoft, we are supporting code without barriers. Here in India and elsewhere in the world, where women can learn about coding, and technology today is most often still a boys' club, and so it's hard to enter that club and certainly be the only one that is female and then ask all the questions and fear and have anxiety about getting answers to those questions.
Yep.
Well, Copilot doesn't judge you. It doesn't. You can ask as many questions as you want, and you will get an answer, and you can keep exploring that topic without the help of others. And I think that will unlock so much more creativity. It will enable everybody on this planet, if they want to learn coding.
So essentially, the community will go exponentially, is what you're telling us. Let me then also bring in a question of the efficiency aspect. You alluded to that in one of the answers that you gave. Tell us about that. I understand there are studies that GitHub has conducted. Yeah. What does it do in terms of efficiencies, in terms of when we pen it down to a number? What is the kind of efficiency gain that we're looking at post the use of Copilot that you have seen with the developer community here in India?
So we started working with Copilot, on Copilot already back in June 2020. So now 4 years ago, on the previous generation of models called GPT-3 back then. And soon enough, we noticed that Copilot can actually write significant amounts of code. In the early days, it was around 25% or so of the code in those files where it was enabled. Now that number is about 50%, sometimes even 60%, right? So think about this. The developer writes code, and half of that code, half of that output is coming from an AI model. And we then did case studies, and we gave some developers Copilot, 50 or so, and the other group didn't have Copilot, and we asked them to implement a standard coding task, and we noticed that the group with Copilot was up to 55% faster, right? And that's a mind-blowing productivity increase. But more so, if we ask developers in surveys, they actually tell us that they're more satisfied when using Copilot. They're more fulfilled. They require less energy to get the job done, to do something we call boilerplate code. It's, a lot of coding is like repetitive things that you do over and over again. And so we have this two-sided benefit. One is that the C-suite of a company is excited about the productivity gains of getting more innovation done, and the users actually excited about using this tool. And many developers tell us they don't want to work without a Copilot anymore.
That's such an interesting insight. Let's also talk about looking beyond code completion. Copilot, of course, critical, you're saying, a 55% efficiency gain. And you mentioned the C-suite leaders are very happy with that as well. Give us an insight as to the next leg of growth for you, the next leg of evolution as far as Copilot is concerned. Beyond code completion, beyond line completion, what are we looking at?
4 years ago, we started with completions, and then last year we added chat. In November 2022, ChatGPT came out and changed everything. So last year we spent most of our time of adding chat, and chat really gives you this natural language, this human language interface. This year in 2024, we're going a step further by building agents that can take over little tasks that developers do, little parts of the job. One such example is fixing security vulnerabilities. If I speak with customers here in India or elsewhere in the world, they all are struggling with keeping up with fixing security vulnerabilities, fixing compliance issues, keeping up with privacy regulations, whether it's here in India or the European Union or back in the United States and California. And so they have so much work to do that they need agents that help them to burn down these backlogs. And I think the future not only of security will be agentic, but of the professional workforce will be agentic. We will have companions that help us with the jobs that we don't want to do, to focus on the ones that are actually fun. And for developers, that means creating new features, creating new systems, creating AI ultimately.
Interesting. Let me widen the scope of the conversation. You, of course, are at the helm, at the cutting edge of this Gen AI technology. Looking beyond just Copilot, looking beyond GitHub, donning your hat as a tech company captain. Give us a sense. We've all been talking about Gen AI. It's clearly the buzzword across the board, across sectors, across industries. I want to get a sense what this technology in your mind could evolve into. So far, we're seeing LLMs, we're seeing travel itineraries being planned, we're seeing study material being analyzed, we're seeing study coaches. This, of course, amongst the use cases that we are seeing now. As this technology gains ground, gains traction, What is the next stage of evolution? What does it look like? What does the next stage of evolution look like? What are some of the other new use cases that we may be looking at?
I think the technology, the Copilot, will develop into a companion that's always with us. You could think about it as the Jarvis to Iron Man in the Marvel movies, something that memorizes all the things that we can store in our brains because there's too much information in our lives. And today, we already have something like that in our pockets. It's our mobile phone, our smartphone that stores a lot of the information. But then you still have to go into your mail app and search for that one email, that has your frequent flyer number. And instead of finding that, you're finding all the marketing material from that airline. And so you will have that companion that you can ask questions about things that happened to you last month, last year, maybe, in the farther future, what happened to you as a 6-year-old. And so you will have that second brain, that second memory that can reason over that information, that can advise you of what book is the right book to buy in the bookstore. And if you take that into the professional workforce, today with the Microsoft Copilot, we already have capabilities in Teams to summarize a meeting, to identify action items, to log who has said what, and imagine you're coming back from vacation and you have all these Teams chats and meetings that have happened during that time. You can go through those and have it summarize the information for you, so you don't have to read through all of that, because today we have information overload, and every system, every video app, every streaming service, sports, all that is fighting for our attention, and we have only so much time during the day that we can spend on both work and personal life, that these companions will help us to filter out signal from all the noise that is in our lives. I think that is the important thing. It will enable us to be more creative, to use our energy to things that are really meaningful in life, and get rid of all the noise, whether it's booking travel, whether it's fighting through emails, or summarizing a meeting.
You've given me that hook. I can't let you go without talking more about it. You're saying that this will be the Jarvis, what Jarvis was to Iron Man. Taking that analogy forward, just want to get your thoughts. We also get a lot of dystopian views coming in from Hollywood. Is that an apprehension? Is that something? Or is that creative fiction perhaps only finding its way with this new technology?
I think, the Hollywood view gives us the dystopian future that we don't want to achieve. And as such, it gives us that, how do I say this? It gives us this world that we don't want to go to as a warning to be responsible with AI, to leverage the progress that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, the high energy that's in the AI world, to also invest into responsible AI, into the ethical use, into the secure use, into data privacy and compliance. And I actually think if you look back to the last year, not only has that topic been on top of mind of many stories in the news and in the media, but it also has been top of mind for almost all companies that are working on AI. And so iteratively, while we're making the models better, we are also evolving our thinking and our technology that helps us to use that AI in a responsible, in a secure way. So I'm actually optimistic that Hollywood future isn't happening, because as humans, we have that natural tendency of making our lives better. Like we want a better future for ourselves and for our children.
Sure. That's such an interesting answer. An interesting perspective, the way to look at it. Let's dial the conversation back in to as far as GitHub is concerned. You, of course, work in very close partnership with Microsoft. Copilot is backed by OpenAI, which in many respects has an edge in terms of Gen AI. Give us a sense that with this journey, this partnership with Microsoft, as it evolves, as it grows, what are some of these synergies that you're hoping to benefit from? What are the key takeaways from you when you look at the evolution of Copilot?
As we have been working on this already for 4 years, I can tell you, the synergies have been fantastic. We have a 3-sided partnership. OpenAI is developing these amazing models, and now we are at GPT-4o, and we're really excited about the opportunities that can give to software developers that we have already achieved over the last few years. Microsoft has that amazing team building out, the Azure cloud around the world in many regions, including here in India, and many of the models are actually available through the Azure OpenAI service here in India. But not only does it give us the infrastructure, it also gives us this responsible AI layer that helps us to focus at GitHub on what we love doing most, which is focusing and working with software developers. So we building the developer tooling, the GitHub Copilot. Microsoft gives us the infrastructure, the responsible AI. OpenAI gives us the amazing model. All of them give us amazing energy. And of course, if we look at Microsoft as a whole, Copilot is no longer just a developer tool. It's a platform that spans many Microsoft products, that it spans many things that we're doing in our professional lives and even in our personal life. I often open Microsoft Copilot at the dinner table when the family, is having an argument about things, or the kids are asking questions about, New Delhi as an example, and then we just talk into the Copilot, put the phone in the middle of the table, and let it tell us the answer, and so you can remove the heat a bit on the table argument, and I think we are looking into a future where the Copilot is part of our lives and of our way of living.
Interesting. Let's dial the conversation towards some of the concerns that have also been raised. Let's talk about increased efficiencies. That, of course, is a welcome product. That's, of course, what you're aiming for, increasing in efficiencies. The question I want to ask you in simple terms is that if there are two coders who can do the job combined with the Copilot Edge, if they can do the job of three, as an IT company C-suite leader, why would I hire the third person? And therefore the question of labor substitution.
Well, first of all, because with AI, there's so many new things that you have to build as a leader. In this age of AI, those companies that are embracing AI will be ahead of the curve, and those that are waiting for too long will be behind, in the same way that we have seen in the past with companies not embracing the internet or not embracing open source or not embracing mobile. They ultimately always got to the point where they had to wake up and realize that now they have to not only get into the technology, they have to catch up to those that have been already investing into this. So I think number one, we need more developers here in India that work on AI system that move the companies that are embracing the technology forward. Number two is, if I look at software companies, and every company today really is a software company, as software has eaten the world, is that we have so much work to do. Most companies have a long backlog of ideas, of innovation, of brainstorming from a whiteboarding session, that they never get through all these ideas, and they have to cherry pick the things that they can actually do. And then on the other side, they have all the legacy. Many companies, especially in the financial services sector, are still running COBOL code. That's a programming language that was invented during the Eisenhower era in the late 1950s. They're still running that on mainframes, and then they have code from the 60s, 70s, and so on, that they have to maintain, and all of them want to modernize that, because the people that built that code in the 60s, they're long retired. and as such, I think we are all balancing the time we spend on innovation with the time that we spend on our security compliance legacy, modernization backlog, and everybody wants to bring that effort down. And the pile is so big that we both need AI technology to move to the next abstraction layer, to the next, level of capabilities for our developers, while we also need to hire more developers, those that come with new skills like prompt engineering, like machine learning, understanding and building large language models.
Interesting. That brings me to my second question. We earlier spoke about how India has a very strong developer population, very large, working with some of the leading tech companies. So clearly the knowledge base is there. Now, of course, there's the AI edge as well. They're working with AI leading technologies. The question I want to ask is, why does a country like India, which has these dual benefits, not have an indigenous LLM that can compete with some of the larger models such as ChatGPT? Why don't we have that? Why does India not have that? Is there something missing from this equation?
Every time I come to India, I see so much is changing so fast. The energy of India is like the energy of AI. Every week something new is developing. So there's actually now startups in India working on large language models. One such example is OpenHearty, which is now a startup that has investment from Lightspeed and Khosla partners. And so I'm sure there, soon enough will be large language models that are native indigenous to India that speak, many of the 200 or so Indian languages and dialects, and the open source community will help with that. India is very strong in open source, as I mentioned earlier, it's the second largest community on GitHub already. There's many open source AI projects from India on our platform, and I'm sure they will leverage the open source research that happens through models like Llama that have come out in recent months, and use that to build, the Indian large language model.
Interesting. Let's also talk about regulation. I think anytime we talk about development of AI, this conversation is had in parallel with the need to regulate it. But more recently, the one distinct shift that at least I personally have seen is that the conversation has shifted from ethical AI and from training of AI models to also talking about concentration of AI tech in the hands of a few companies. I'm given to understand there are leaders here from the government side that are looking at it in India, the US, the Department of Justice, the FDA, in Europe as well. They're looking at it. How would you respond to these concerns and fears being expressed by government institutions on narrowing down of the leading AI technology in a few hands?
On the one side, of course, at Microsoft, we are pushing really hard, to be one of the leaders in this age of AI, in this age of Copilot. And we are really proud of the innovation that we have delivered in the last year. On the other side, if you actually look out there, both in the news and in the community, there has been so much competition heating up. There's both more open source model, there's closed source models, there's hybrid efforts where developers take some of these open source models and fine tune them for their specific use cases. So I'd say the competition has never been stronger in this space, in this generative AI space. And there's something new literally every day, if not even more often. Like sometimes it's by the hour that some innovation is happening. There's AI companies in Paris with Mistral as an example. Stable Diffusion was developed in partnership between universities in Germany and in the United Kingdom. We have, of course, a lot of open source work happening on the US West Coast, and here in India, we are seeing a lot of innovation. So I think competition is really strong, and we're going to only see more of that in the coming months and years.
You speak of competition. Let me bring in one aspect of competition. One company that is not seeing a lot of competition is NVIDIA. I think they're very highly in demand. I think more recently they've crossed the $3 trillion market cap level. I just want to get your thoughts. Looking at it from a challenge perspective, of course, training of these AI models require GPUs. Is that a concern? Is that a challenge for you in terms of getting the GPUs from NVIDIA? It's become a scarce resource as far as AI development is concerned. So just your thoughts on NVIDIA and the huge demand that exists, which outstrips the supply that we currently have.
NVIDIA clearly had a head start in this age of AI, but it's also easy to forget that a few years ago, NVIDIA had to write off a number of their GPUs that they had produced for the crypto boom that was happening back then. So these things change fast. We see other companies pushing now to also build powerful GPUs, whether it's partners like Intel or AMD, whether it's, I think, 24 or so silicon startups that are back in Silicon Valley. I think for the first time in a long time, we can now say that Silicon Valley actually has silicon companies again. They're developing chips that are optimized for transformer models, and I think we're going to see more competition in that space as well. And of course, NVIDIA will do their best to sustain their lead for the longest time. But I think whether it's at that part of the stack, in GPUs, whether it's a level higher at the model stack, or whether it's at the responsible AI, ethical use of AI, and of course at the application at the Copilot layer of the stack, there's competition elsewhere. And the energy that I'm seeing is both incredible and exciting. I don't think we have seen anything like that since the birth of the internet in the early 90s, when the world changed around us. And if you and I would travel back, to 1993 and try to predict what life would be like we have it now in 2024, we probably would have been way off from what our life is actually like.
Interesting. Given that we are speaking of NVIDIA, I can't help us but have this conversation. We have it in the newsrooms, conversations about how NVIDIA may exceed the market cap for Microsoft as well. Is that something that inspires maybe coffee room conversations inside closed doors, inside boardrooms? Is that something that a conversation you've had in terms of NVIDIA overtaking Microsoft?
I don't think the market capitalization is on our mind on a day-to-day basis. I think we have so much energy of focusing on the value that we can provide to our customers, on what we can do next for GitHub Copilot, for all the Copilots at Microsoft, and ultimately, specifically for GitHub. we're really obsessed about software developers. We have the saying at GitHub, we always put the developer first. That is part of our mindset, part of our culture. And so whether it's in talking with you today, whether it's in talking with customers here in India, or next week with thousands of developers in Bengaluru, that is what excites me. That's what top of mind. And I want to make the world better through software, through enabling developers to drive human progress.
Interesting. You talked about developer community, you talked about India. Let's bring the conversation back here. What does the GitHub footprint in India look like a year from now, 2 years from now? Can you give us a picture? Early half of 2023, we saw a few job cuts. Is the tide past that? Are we looking at more investments? Are we looking at greater hiring? What does the footprint for GitHub in India look like?
And we had to make a hard decision early 2023 to lay off some developers here in India, not because they were in India, but because they were working on areas of our product that we had to de-scope, to be able to focus on AI and react to the economic environment. But that said, Microsoft has a long tradition here in India with over 20,000 developers or 20,000 employees, many of them developers in Hyderabad in our India Development Center. And we at GitHub collaborate with many of those developers on AI, on Copilot, on building agents for that next age of AI. I think in the coming years we will deepen that investment. We will collaborate with partners here in New Delhi and elsewhere. For example, we recently announced our Copilot extension program where other companies can build within the Copilot stack and extend the knowledge that Copilot Chat has with their software, with their cloud system. One such example is Lambda Test, a company here, a startup here of New Delhi that enables developers to do web and mobile testing. And they now integrate into our Copilot to enable developers not to only ask generic programming questions or questions around their code, but also questions around all the other systems that sit in their stack.
That's so interesting. Let me also then talk about engagement and traction within the startup community. You mentioned Copilot, you mentioned Copilot Enterprise. Are you seeing greater traction? And are there any names that you would like to share in terms of partners, companies, startups that you're working with here in the Indian market?
So the interesting thing I think about Copilot over the last few years has been that it's really new technology. AI is still the cutting edge, yet we have seen many large companies across many industries already adopting it, whether it's Infosys and Cognizant, whether it's Paytm or Make My Trip, and many hundreds of startups and old companies both equally have adopted GitHub Copilot. And that makes us really excited about this future of generative AI. It's not this one-off thing that has still proved itself, that still has to cross the chasm as we stay. I think we're already past that point where it's proven that technology will make developers' life better. And I think, as we head forward, any Indian company that's developing software, any software development company will have many Copilots in their workforce.
It's interesting. Very recently, there was also a study which was released which talked about how a lot of industry leaders are not just looking at cost savings, but are looking at, by engaging with AI, of course, are not looking at just cost savings, but also at optimization, at increased efficiencies. Is that the feedback that you're getting? Is that the main driver behind some of these AI investments that are being made by the Indian players?
It's a mix of both. Of course, the economic environment over the last 2 years hasn't been always easy. And so CTOs and other leaders are looking for optimizations in their budgets, in their developer spend. At the same time, many of them that I'm talking to are also looking for, how can I innovate faster? How can I bring more value to market to my customers? And they see AI, they see Copilot as one way of doing that. So I think it's a balance that business decision makers have to make, that they always have to make in companies. Everybody has a budget. I have one budget and I have only so much money to spend. So I have to put my bets where I believe the future is, and we strongly believe that AI is enabling that, and ultimately it comes back to what I said earlier. It's productivity gains combined with developer happiness. Grumpy developers will not innovate. Happy developers are the ones that create the future of tomorrow.
I think that's a big punchline for us. So we'll factor that in as a part of our coverage as well. Grumpy developers don't create innovation. But let's go ahead, and this is my final question here. With respect to the Indian market, what is the kind of traction that you're hoping for? What is the kind of expectations that you have? Any numbers that you would like to drop on this journey forward? And what the next leg of growth in India for you looks like?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we want to see this happening. We want to see that 2027, India is becoming the largest developer community on the planet. We want to see, maybe in the future, the next Microsoft or the next big tech company coming out of Mumbai or coming out of Bangalore. Maybe they're coming out of Rio de Janeiro or out of Paris as well, right? I think we want to see that the democratization of software development is actually happening, that the human language empowers everyone who wants to build software to be able to do that. And specifically here in India, we want to see, more. We want to see more students learning coding. We want to see more startups, building cool technology. We want to see that Indian large language model from happening, and of course, we want to see more engagement with the GitHub community.
Interesting. I know I said the last question. I'll try to just squeeze in time, a couple more minutes to ask you one final question. Not going into the politics of it, but India has just completed the elections. A new government, whichever government were to take power, India is among the many countries that is looking at a framework that will provide guardrails, yet at the same time provide room for innovation. Broadly speaking, if you could narrow down perhaps one or two suggestions that you would give to the government in terms of what an ideal framework should look like.
For us as GitHub, one of the most important things about regulation is to make sure that open source, that research can still happen in an unconstrained or almost unconstrained way. If you're a single developer in Hyderabad that wants to work on a large language model or an AI project, you don't have the means to build out a large compliance team or to pay a lawyer to make sure you're compliant with all the regulations. Big companies can do that, and they should be doing that, and the government should hold them accountable. But open source development, the open source community should be able to collaborate on a free basis to create the innovation that we need to drive human progress. I think the other question that many countries need to ask themselves is, how does our regulation compare with those of our partners? Here in India, with many companies are international. They're operating in many markets, including my home country, Germany, the United States, and many other places. And so regulation, if it's not harmonized across these markets, means that developers, when they're using a Copilot, get different benefits. And so we might have an unfair race between these developers using Copilot in Berlin versus the developers in Bangalore. And I think that's not what we want. We don't want an unfair competition. As in any sport, we want to have a level playing field. And I think that's really important to think about when governments create regulation, enable open source and open research, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position that that puts other countries in a favorable position.
Thomas, it's been such an engaging conversation to understand where AI is positioned as we speak and where it's headed from here. A lot of interesting insights into what India could do with this technology and what perhaps it needs to do to benefit from it, to exploit from it. Thomas, I'd like to thank you once again for taking our time, for sharing this time with us and for sharing your insights. We hope to continue this conversation the next time you're here. We'd love to interact with you again. But for now, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much for the great conversation.